Thank you so much, everyone, for taking the time out of your busy schedules and joining us today. So my name is Jenny, and this is Bonnie.
Hi.
And we're very excited to be hosting this town hall meeting on compassionate communities.
Okay, so you can see the agenda, just quickly going through it. So we have a couple of presentations, then we're going to have a little quick break. And then we do have some small group. We want to ask you questions. So what the whole point of the meeting is Jenny and I are really interested in this for Toronto, and we want to see if there's interest in Toronto. That's the ultimate goal. And then obviously from there, we will take that interest and see about trying to maybe formalize a steering committee to try to move this forward. So after the small groups, we're going to have some lunch, and then we're going to, Julie Darnay from HPCO will be telling us about some work that they're doing to support compassionate communities, and we'll do a quick wrap up. I'd also like to thank Kirsten and Carly, correct? Yay. They're here today as our note takers. They've been nice enough to volunteer their time, and they both have public health background as well, so this is good. We're spreading the idea. Okay. So the next person to the podium is MPP Fraser, who's also Parliamentary Assistant to the Minister of Health and Long-Term Care, and is also very interested in palliative care.
I am the Parliamentary Assistant to the Minister of Health. My mandate is, biggest part of my mandate is palliative end-of-life care. You know, I feel very fortunate because it was a mandate that I asked for. And I come from a background where I volunteered in palliative care in the mid-90s when I was in the grocery business. I became involved from a policy perspective when I worked for the former Premier in Ottawa. And then I went through, similar to Bonnie, my father was diagnosed with inoperable oral cancer right after I got elected for the first time, about 4 years ago. And so that was a journey that we went through as a family. We were lucky we had a small army. And I got to see firsthand the challenges that families face. Provincially, we've come out with, we did a report with the help of the ministry and a lot of great people, palliative end-of-life care report about what we need to do to make sure that we get access, quality care. And so we've made some measures in the budget. We're going to be opening 20 new hospices. There are more investments that are coming in home and community care. So there are a lot of really great things happening, and what I like to describe it as is a really great start. It's a really great start for government. The reality is, when you look at hospice palliative care, it's a community-based initiative. That's why it's successful. Its success is based on the fact that people come together to solve a challenge that's in front of them, that's a common challenge. And so, you know, as a government, we have to find the right way to support that. We'll be doing some stuff around capital to help support hospices, because we know that we need to give some support there, because it'll be very hard to get everything we want to get open, because each community has a different capacity. We need to come together around the things that we share in common experience. And we have many vulnerable people in our communities, and that vulnerability is not only about our economic status or where we live. It's about when we're vulnerable in times of our lives and how we can support each other. You know, 9 months to the day after my father passed away, our first grandson was born. And it got me to thinking, we were really ready for the new baby. So nursery's ready, families are ready, everybody's ready, hospitals are ready. End of life, not so much, right? So how we care for each other at the end of our lives deserves the same kind of attention as we give to the beginning of lives. When you're a politician, you have this great ability to be able to say, to bring people together. Like, you can organize. People will come, people will take your call, people who have that skill already, people who've done that, community leaders, they don't have to be politicians, people who've brought people together around another issue are really great people to do that.
So what I'm going to do is just quickly go through what is compassionate community. One of the approaches that you can use, as PA Fraser mentioned, there are a few different ones. Quickly kind of showing, you know, between 2006, 2011, we've got an increase in that 65 plus age group. And you know, the thing to think about this as well is it's not just these 65 plus we're thinking about that we want to, you know, we want to support. It's those caregivers. It's that sandwich generation as well, right? So while, yes, we tend to highlight this number, we got to think as well, the next point, for every one death, 5 people are affected, right? So if we've got a 7.5 increase just in that population, we've got a lot of people affected around them. So just very quickly, you know, old model, as it says up there, it's a sudden change in goals. So it's kind of abrupt. It's not family friendly. I went through the old model with my late partner. All of a sudden we were at chemo, and then the chemo oncologist said to us, okay, you're in organ failure now. You can't do any more chemo. You have 2 weeks to 2 months left. I'm going to switch you to the palliative care doctor. I wish you all the best. So that's the abrupt. Right? So the new model, that has been out for a couple of years now, and we are really, I know we're designing and pushing to try and go to the new model, is the idea that when someone's diagnosed as terminal or with a life-limiting illness, they should start to interact with palliative care at that point, right? The research said roughly about 10% of the day, if you averaged it all out, would be formal care. So that's anytime you're at a doctor's appointment, anytime you're basically in contact with any sort of medical professional. But then informally, there's 90% of the day where there is no care. So who steps up to the plate on that, right? So how can we support the other 90% of the day? And this is where compassionate communities, to me, makes sense. So just quickly, you know, around the idea of what a compassionate community is, what the goal is, it's a population-wide approach. So that's where the public health piece comes in, right? It's about the idea of supporting everybody along the trajectory, no matter whether you're 2 or you're 95. People within the communities promote activities that strengthen social capital, right? Trust, that kind of idea in relation to end-of-life care. Communities recognize that all natural cycles of life, so P.A. Fraser mentioned that. You know, we do a really great job of celebrating a baby and preparing for it, but we're not doing such a great job on the other side. So the idea being that we recognize all cycles of life and that they occur in the everyday settings we interact with. And that's why schools and workplaces are a part of this, because you're interacting. You may be going to school, or your kids are going to school, you're going to work, that kind of idea. They also recognize, and this was a big one for me, and I come from New Brunswick, so this came pretty natural to me, as we're kind of one of the have-not provinces, is the idea that caring for one another is everybody's responsibility. It's not just the responsibility of the medical professionals, right? There's no reason why we can't support each other. Using existing resources. So I've worked on this project in Burlington, I've worked on this project in Niagara West, and I've been working with the Ottawa group. And every single time there's so much stuff going on already. We just need to make those connections, right? So, you know, obviously from a budget point of view, this is a minimal cost piece as well. And really, I truly believe, so I've been interacting with medical professionals in all the cities, and we see it as, this is a two-prong approach. There's the medical piece, there's the community piece. The two of us together, working together, will provide more support in general, which hopefully will reduce the amount of cracks that people fall into, right? Okay, so again, as P.A. Fraser mentioned, there are a few different ways to go about creating compassionate communities. I have the most experience with this one, and Jenny has heard about it as well. This one's out of the UK, and it's a framework. It's almost like a checklist to get you going. And so it's a public health approach. It uses the Ottawa Charter, and it's designed basically around health promotion, right? But the idea being that it's a combination of a top-down and a bottom-up, right? So top-down, working on reorienting those environments, right? So maybe it could be as simple as workplaces and making sure the workplaces are aware of what leave of absence exists, what EI funding exists. So it's not necessarily that they have to go above and beyond, but just making sure that those policies are there in the staff manual. And the bottom-up piece, meaning ask the community what they need, what they see, what resources they exist, right? So fostering that grassroots kind of idea. So just quickly, this is the framework for the Compassionate City Charter. Again, as P.A. Fraser said, the idea that every community is going to look a little different, right? We're all following roughly this same framework, but what we do in schools may be different in Burlington than what Ottawa does, than what Toronto does. Okay, so here's our clock. Our clock is a little more filled in now. So if you take some of those sections that are in the charter and we start making those connections, so say, for instance, there's a church in a certain area that says, listen, we have tons of people interested in dropping off food. Just let us know of a family that needs some food or a person and we'll drop food off. Okay, so you'll have to decide how you create that system. But so say Mr. Smith is down the road from the church, doesn't attend the church, but him and his wife could really use some food because they're on their, they're maybe at end of life. The church pops over, drops some food off. That's it.
So I'm going to take a bit of your time to just chat about what's going on in Ontario, what's going on in Toronto, to really give you some ideas and generate a conversation about what we may potentially see here in Toronto. On each of the tables there is a red notepad, and you should have a pen as well, so that if you can designate one person at each group to be a scribe, and then while you're talking about each of these 4 questions, you should also have a list of the 4 questions as well, and just jotting down these notes so that later on we can compile your ideas and chat more over even more refreshments.
Yeah, at the end, we'd like to just kind of go through your answers as well from each group. So, yeah, if somebody could scribe, that would be great. And I think we're going to give roughly about a half an hour for this. Okay, awesome. Thank you.
I don't really know too much about what's happening on the city level or on the LIN level, but I know there's a lot of funding put into specific types of pockets, and I think we need to for instance, and we're so new, we're still learning programs and really depends. So I think urban planning. But before you even got to the hospital, it was it was very wet.
It is always the fear when we speak of that we feel that